Welcome back to the Lookout. Playing a little music from the Avant-Gardeners, the self-proclaimed darlings of the underground Plumas County funk scene, circa about 1999. A little mountain music with a Orleans connection. Fun thing about Northern California, everyone's connected. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the Boise Fire over in Orleans, and we're going to talk a bit about the park fire. Got some imagery we want to share from Chico Creek Canyon showing the severity of the fire, and also we came across a cool drone video of fire effects of the park fire in Upper Bidwell Park. So we'll put that together. So we're going to start off talking about park fires. We kind of set the stage for talking about the park fire, talking about politics and fire history and the unique culture around fire in the Klamath Mountains. Talked to a few friends from over there today and got a few more kind of insights. And so let's jump into the Lookout live stream. Lookout live stream is brought to you tonight by Q-Tech. Q-Tech is based here in Chico, California, and they're a manufacturer of custom fire equipment. And their mission kind of goes along with a larger mission that a lot of us are working on, which is to kind of take back control of fire management from the public agencies. There's no law that says that you can't burn your property. You can't burn your property during fire season, but people who live in the woods have a right to use fire. And part of using fire well and responsibly is being well equipped. And so Q-Tech, we've been working with their equipment on prescribed fires, and check out, if you go to our website and check out the link to Q-Tech, they got great videos there and they got great equipment. So glad to have them as a sponsor. Thank you, Q-Tech. Also want to point you to the lookout.org. It's our website, and we'll show some stuff from it later. But if you're just joining us, this is it. This is the Lookout. Our mission is to help increase the fire literacy of our friends and neighbors in Northern California. And so welcome in. We're going to jump kind of right into our latest example here of we're using the Boise Creek fire in on the Six Rivers and now Klamath National Forest to kind of as our learning laboratory tonight. So here we've got infrared from last night of the Boise Fire. The Boise Fire is burning in Orleans, California. And Orleans is over here in the Klamath Mountains. Here's Arcata. Over here's Wairika. And halfway in between really is the Salmon River and the confluence with the Klamath. Up here's Crescent City. And down over here would be Redding. So it's kind of the Lost Isles of northwestern California. And if you want to learn more about this unique area and haven't seen our previous couple videos, check out our videos from the last couple days on Orleans and pre-fire planning. And kind of one of the themes for tonight is kind of the limits of planning. Really, like we talked about how we've done all this planning work in the Klamath, and there seems to be kind of a missing like last mile between the planning and the reality of firefighting. So I want to talk about that because this fire is a great example of how you can do all this legwork to kind of build community vision around how fire could work, and you can have your plans and your strategies and know what the community wants, and then when it comes down to it, a team comes from out of the area and the locals kind of lose control of the process. So let's talk about this fire, and the whole point of this isn't to bag on the team that's there, that's tasked with putting out a fire in an area that hasn't burned for 100 years, but it is to kind of shine light on just the process and how things work here. So we've got Orleans down here. We've got Perch Creek, which is kind of like a little suburb of Orleans. Basically, it's just this group of folks here that live here on Perch Creek Road. And folks, importantly, in Perch Creek had a fire that burned down in their backyard all last summer. And also importantly, they get their water from Perch Creek. That's like the domestic water source for Perch Creek, and I think also for a lot of people in Orleans. Don't quote me on that, but someone can maybe chime in. So here, just for context, zooming out from Perch Creek is the Perch Fire that burned last year. We covered that extensively last year. If you want to learn more about it, go back and check out our videos from last August and September. But basically what happened last year, the fire was established out in here in an area that had burned in 2006, which is shown here in purple. And the fire was kind of slowly growing in here. And the local Kaduk tribe people and also other kind of local fire burners started getting involved in the strategy meetings. And there's a woman named Anna Wright, who's a division supervisor, fire line boss for the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Anna's burned with us and helped as an instructor and participant in the Klamath River Treks prescribed fire events going back like 10 years. So Anna, it's really important these personal relationships get built around fire, and they're really important when fire happens. And so last year, having Anna be the division boss for this sector of the fire opened up lines of communication and made it possible for some really unique things to happen, which we've talked about already with local folks getting involved in actually firing this and working with the hotshot crews to bring fire down this ridge and create beneficial fire effects for the watershed. Another important thing that happened last year was, and this is a big deal, was the Somas fire in 2006. That was kind of right when the whole VLAT DC-10 thing started happening, and people were really excited about dropping 8,000 gallons of retardant out of a plane in a single go. And so they used the VLAT in Perch Creek in 2006, and that winter, water quality tests in this creek, which is the watershed that all these people drink out of, showed elevated levels of phosphates, because PhosCheck, the retardant, basically is heavy in phosphates, right? It's like a fertilizer, and everyone says, oh, it's harmless. But the drinking water standards for phosphates were exceeded for 6 years following that fire due to the drops of retardant on the headwaters of this domestic watershed. So 6 years of not passing EPA tests for phosphates. That's how long it took for those VLAT drops to kind of flush through the system. So they say this stuff's harmless, but you don't want it in your drinking water. So one thing that happened last year was Anna was division soup, and the locals said, hey, we don't want retardant used on this flank of the fire. And so they kind of negotiated, and Anna figured out how to get them to use scoopers instead. So they did water drops instead of retardant drops. So anyway, so I fired up. So yesterday, let's get to the fire. That's just some backstory that we're going to talk about. So the fire's been burning down in here for quite a few days. Started down in the watershed, kind of low here, and it kind of ran up in the first few days. It kind of burnt on top of this knob, but it's been slowly backing down towards Boise Creek. And yesterday we looked at the infrared and we said, hey, that's going to reverse the slope and it's going to make a big run. So if you look at, here's the perimeter from the night before last in white. And so we saw it backing down here towards the Boise Creek, and it was pretty obvious that, like, hey, this is going to, as soon as this crosses the slope, it's going to blast up this steep mountain above it. So that's what happened last night. It roasted. And so talking to friends over here, this creek hasn't burned for 100 years, and it's like got some of the heaviest fuel loading of anywhere in this whole area. So I got some photos from a friend of mine here. Let me load them up. A lot of you have probably seen the photos of what things looked like last night. So it was, definitely, it just came boiling out of there. So on the Facebook page for the fire today and yesterday as the fire's blowing up, the official fire information page says there's a lot of energy to this fire and VLATs are doing continuous drops. So who's this message for? Like, who? If we know that the locals, A, weren't afraid of the fire getting into their watershed because it all burned last year, and B, that they really are upset about 6 years of drinking water contamination from the last time VLATs were dropping all over the head of their watershed. This to me seems really out of touch. And then today, also they're showing the DC-10 painting with retardant. Now, I understand that retardant can be helpful in stopping the fire, and most people don't want the fire to burn their house. But when a fire is blowing up like this, we all know that VLATs like aren't going to stop it, right? So just a messaging thing, and just I think an example of conflicted messaging and confusion on my part of like, okay, are we still like, just to kind of place that in context, this is kind of what the scene looked like when they're painting it with retardant. So fire ran hard up out of Boise Creek. You've got this ridge line here coming off Orleans Mountain that was used as a fire line in 2006, used as a fire line last year, prepped incredibly well and fired. And then the whole north slope here, what would burn last year burned, and what didn't burn, it's fine if it burns now, right? Like it's surrounded with serious reduced fuels. And so the forest, the ranger unit, the local ranger unit, when this team got assigned, but even like, days ago, folks have been kind of trying to engage a strategy of saying like, hey, early on, let's get fire established high in these watersheds to give it a little time to back down the hill before, because we know that when it reverses slope, it's going to boil out of here. So if we can throw some fire down here on the ground before that happens, that'd be great. Well, that didn't happen. And so basically they had crews out here kind of running down this road, lighting it right out ahead of this massive crown fire running up the hill. So talking to some local folks, it's just when you bring in a team from out of the area, it takes them a while to get their feet to figure out their strategy, to figure out what, to hit the ground running. And so we talked yesterday about, pods and, delineating control lines well beforehand. But what it sounds like to me, talking to some folks, local folks over there who are in the Forest Service who were managing this fire, one, they said this team got here incredibly quickly. We're used to hiring a team, calling a team, and it takes like 2 days for them to get here. But they ordered a team early on, and then the team got there really quick. So they're saying, in retrospect, like, it would have been good if we had a little more time to do our own thing before the team came, because the local unit wanted to put fire on the ground up here. But there's things like they don't have a helicopter on their district. They don't have a drone that can drop fireballs. And so it points to like this gap where it's like, okay, we can have a plan that says like, when we have a fire in this area because it's surrounded with these historic fires, we'd like to right off the bat start dropping fire, burning off the existing footprints so we can reduce the severity of the fire coming up the hill. But unless you've got like the drone pilot on speed dial and the forest supervisor already signed off on this plan, maybe the forest supervisor's out of town, maybe the district ranger's at a meeting. Like, this stuff, really to be operational, it has to be like ready to roll and pre-approved, because then once the team's in motion, then there's this whole inertia of like, oh, we got to get porta potties set up, we got to feed the people, and it's like, yeah, it's all very important, but there's also this kind of what can be a kind of time critical operational need to implement a strategy quickly that has already been kind of blessed by the locals and the local unit. So none of that's to criticize the team. It's just to kind of point out that folks have been talking about firing out ahead of this fire for like 5 or 6 days ever since it got started, and it didn't happen just because there was an inertia that prevented that from happening. So, and it may have not changed the outcome in this heavy fuel, steep slopes. Like, they could have put a bunch of fire in here and it might have brought the fire up quicker. It might have made it worse. It's a lot to kind of try to second guess how fire acts on fire. But it is an example of the limits of planning, and then the inertia that happens once you bring in an overhead team that has its own kind of machinations of decision making. Anyway, yeah, there's not a lot of structures out here. So just to kind of tour the fire and what we think might be happening now. They had dozer line that came down this ridge here that was already established. And they fired that last night in a hurry. We don't really know if the fire's gone over that. According to this post, things are going well today. All right, we'll figure that out. So they fired off this road ahead of the fire. That didn't hold. Like, it went up in LaBurn. I don't think it was supposed to hold. Actually, I don't know what's going on there. But they fired a line across here. But the big point is that locals don't think there's enough fuel out in here to really be a problem, and they weren't really that worried about stopping the fire on this ridge. The big problem and the big place to stop the fire is to keep it from getting to Orleans, so to keep it from coming over this way. And so when you see the retardant drops that they're talking about now, those are kind of up on this ridge here. Kind of good news on that front is just that this part of the fire hasn't moved for several days. It's unsecured down here, but this part here hasn't moved for a couple of days. Coming around this side of the fire, they fired this road, the 10N01 road, to kind of keep ahead of fire that might kind of come down the drainage. And that's held for the last day and a half too. And then up on the top of the fire, they've kind of put some fire on the ground along control lines from the 2020 red salmon fire. But also, the likelihood is that it would not do a whole lot of vigorous spread downhill in red salmon. It's just that once fire is established out in here, it requires them to secure it, so you don't have some big crazy, as we talked about before, this part of the fire didn't get a lot of severity in the last fire, and so there are patches here of intact forest, but you can see that there's patches in here that burned hot, and that the fire did consume a lot of the ground fuels. So it's a tough thing to ask someone to, like, oh, don't worry about that edge because that burned 4 years ago, because unless you really know what the patterns are like from when it burned, there might be patches in there that could support a fire. But the decent odds are that the fire would get in there and skunk around and clean up some more stuff from the last burn, and not really like end out spreading the 20 miles or whatever it is. There's nothing really at all threatened anywhere in this direction for a really long ways. Like, you got Hoopa out here, but long ways away. Anyway, firefighters' jobs are to put the fire out, and they don't like leaving stuff messy. They don't want to just like let it skunk around and it's burn for the rest of the summer, even though it's probably ecologically the best thing they could do. This white polygon up here, so we're looking at the fire now. We're coming around to the ridge, looking at the Butler fire where the fire slopped over into it. This white here is just an area that the infrared last night was obscured by clouds, so we don't have mapping of what the fire did out in here. And then you can see that in the last day, in the 24 hours of spread, the fire did spread well down into the Butler fire. There's a piece up on top here that hadn't burned in 2013. One of the folks that I know that's most excited about this burning in the Butler fire is the guy who lives right here, who's not all that worried about this fire hauling us downhill in a 11-year-old burn. He's more excited about, if you look at how patchy the veg is out here, following a couple burns and kind of low quality soils for timber. Some of the locals here are not super concerned about the fire. Obviously, people don't want to have to deal with smoke and the threat of fire backing down into their backyard over the next month. But it's kind of part of living in this country, and I think most people who live there know it. Let's turn on structure map here. Yellow dots are where there's structures out in this country, so there's not a whole hell of a lot of them. And a lot of these structures have been prepped over the last, well, there's been lots of fires. And so it's kind of, people know the drill. So that's the Butler fire. Drama playing out on the Klamath Mountains stage. Like I said, we're not here to pick on the teams that are fighting these fires. We're just here to talk about kind of the context in which they're operating, and I was wondering how we could do it better. How we can get people on the same page well in advance of the fire, so when something like this happens, it doesn't take you a week to get on the same page. The team came in. I think they wanted to listen to the public and they wanted to listen to the tribe, but we've got the whole year to do that, right? We don't want to have to do that in July. Some of the key folks here to talk to are pregnant and having babies soon, and like it would have been good to catch them like when they weren't 8 months pregnant. And everyone's busy in the summer, right? And so the whole deal with pre-planning is you don't want to have to try to track people down when the landscape's on fire. You want to show up and like already have built that rapport, know what's going on. And it's difficult when we have these players. I think just the last point to make here is that when you have a incident command team that comes in to a forest, they get a kind of formal delegation of authority from the forest supervisor. And so they're invited guests of the forest supervisor. And in this country, the forest is kind of the occupier of native lands that were never ceded to them. And the natives still have a lot of ideas about how the land should be managed. And I think we'll know we're making progress when instead of the incident command team coming to work for the occupation government, they're coming to work for the tribe. They're coming to work for the elders, the matriarchs, and kind of fire bearers that have got the ancestral lineage here. Last year that's what happened, and so you had hundreds of firefighters, hotshot crews from all over the place that were basically helping implement the vision of the tribe. They were invited guests of the tribe, and so that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, enough of that. We're going to jump over to Chico. Yeah, we can come back over here if people have some questions, but let's... Someone knows if there's studies of dripping torch gas in the woodlands. That's a good question, too. I know some places we've used propane torches or plumber's torches instead of drip torches because basket makers chew on the willows and they don't want drip torch fuel in their mouth, obviously. Okay, so we're going to interpret some I was thinking about the weather people. I was watching incident meteorologist on a fire up in Idaho, and she had like 5 screens going, and she had these psychedelic pressure gradient maps, and she had another kind of psychedelic satellite image of water vapor, and there's all this crazy psychedelic imagery swirling, and she's just sitting there kind of in this trance looking at these crazy swirly monitors, and then she would like write her forecast, make her pronouncements, and I'm like, how is this different from shamanism, lady? And she thought I was the biggest a-hole. She didn't reply, but I think about that when I like bring up these kind of these really abstract kind of artistic images and use them to tell a story, that this has all got some kind of like shamanic interpretive flow to it. So our latest kind of fire ecology acid trip here is going to take us around Cohasset. All these yellow dots are structures, and then we're going to come down around to Chico, and we're going to look at Bidwell Park, go up Chico Creek, because last night I was laying in bed and I was thinking, man, like my house is like right down here right here, and the creek goes right through like half mile from my house. And then there's an erosion control project, or a drainage project that diverts water around Chico. So the creek comes down and it gets to 5 Mile recreation area, and then there's this dam and this levee system, and the creek kind of gets shunted all around the urban area of Chico in the Mud and Sycamore Creek diversions, and then it drops back down into the Sac River out by West Sacramento Ave. So that intercepts, that canal system intercepts all of this water from all these foothill creeks that in the past could have come down and flooded in Chico. And so there's this one diversion here, and all the water coming down Big Chico Creek goes to this dam, and then it goes around this levee. And if that dam failed, a lot of us would be flooded. Where I live is basically a flood zone, and it's only protected by this little levee up here. So I was just laying in bed thinking, like, man, this whole watershed above me burned. Like, what's going to happen this winter? So this blue area is the watershed of Chico Creek and its tributaries. And then Chico Creek proper kind of gets its water from basically up by Butte Meadows and then down here to this side of Cohasset Ridge. So all this land here that's just cooked right now is gonna be pouring rainwater and silt and mud and everything else down into our backyard this winter. So that inspired me to check out, do a little tour here of the Severity. So we're just going to start here at the top. So red here is pretty much bare dirt or black sticks, and green is intact forest canopy. And the big deal with fire severity from an erosion standpoint is we kind of break it up into low, moderate, and high severity, where low severity is like this green out here, where there's still needles on the trees. And then orange, or moderate severities, there's still needles on the trees, but they're all killed. And then red, or high severity, is like all the pine needles are killed and the trees are just these black sticks, and all the surface litter is also gone. So the big deal with that is that green canopy, a lot of the raindrops just hit trees and they land and they stay in the canopy. The orange canopy, like a lot of that dead leaves and needles falls before the first big storms, or like winds come in the fall, and all that pine needle and leaf litter falls on the ground, and then that is basically a kind of protector of the soil. So raindrops fall and they hit dead needles and they hit dead leaves, but they don't hit soil particles. And what happens with the raindrop, it hits a soil particle, pink, and it bounces it down the hill, pink. And that's soil loss, that's erosion. Raindrop, pink, soil moves down the slope. And so thousands of raindrops, and the soil is just like pink, 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 pink. It's just bouncing down the hill, and it's getting entrained in the runoff. And so you've got problems with soil movement. So just having like some dead needles left on the trees or dead leaves to fall on the ground makes a huge difference in kind of the runoff. So it's bad news when we look up here and we see all this red, all this super torched forest. It's good news when we see down in the bottom of the creek that there's islands here of remaining forest. And a lot of that just had to do with like when the fire burned. So like if we look at, let's see if this, how far back this goes. If we look at like the, we've got a bunch of fire perimeters in here somewhere. Perimeters. So like the morning of the 26th, a fire had burned all of Cohasset Ridge. They weren't showing the island there yet. And it had burned this finger here, but it hadn't burned this little finger here of green, and it hadn't burned here. Like it was, it's a little hard to interpret. And if you look at like the 27th, by the 27th the fire had burned up to here. But there were like these little periods where like, you know, in the morning on the 26th, the fire hadn't necessarily burned. It, like overnight, the fire backed through these areas. So as we talked about a lot, over the course of a fire, you've got all sorts of environments that the fire burns within. Fire that burns for a week, it burns through like a huge range of weather variables. And so if it happens to burn during the time when sun's down, it burns differently than if it burns like in the heat of the day. So what I think is interesting about like this perimeter line here, this is the edge of the fire on the 27th. And so basically the fire kind of laid down. So it did most of its roasting of Chico Creek in like 24th, 25th, 26th. 25th being a big day. But on the 27th it laid down, and it laid down for like a week. And during that time, if you look at like the 28th and the 29th. I don't know if I got that, but then out to like the 31st. It took its time and it burned through this upper part of the watershed under mild conditions, and they also were lighting backfires during that time. So this kind of uppermost timbered part of the watershed got fairly mixed severity. And so that's a good thing. You know, if like 50% of this is mixed severity, it's like a lot better than 100% of it being roasted. It's going to help dissipate some of that rainfall impact. And it's not a bad thing. Little Chico Creek then goes down here through this area that burned really hot. And we're going to get out and shoot some photos on the ground list, but that's just to give you an idea of like, okay, what's the proportion of the upper watershed of Chico Creek that's burned? Like this upper part didn't burn at all, above 32. This portion down between Campbellville and like 9 Mile Creek burned pretty hot. And in between you've got these chunks that didn't burn hot. So down here is bad news. You know, one of the deals here is these mountains. These mountains kind of wring the moisture out of the landscape. So when we look at, give me a second. I got too many layers in my life. Looking at these foothills of the mountains here, like Chico is in the valley, and it gets like 15 inches of rain a year. And by the time you get to Forest Ranch, you get like 60 inches of rain a year. And by the time you get to Butte Meadows, it's quite a bit more than that. So these storms come up across the valley, and they have to raise up and go over these mountains. And when they raise up, the water condenses and we get rain. And so that's why the trees start growing around Forest Ranch. Is below that, it's just kind of desert. You know, let's see, turn off something here. You know, like most of this land that burned in the fire is really deserty. And when you get out here, like in the Issue Wilderness, like there's no soil. You've got these volcanic ridge tops, and they've got like a couple inches of soil if they have any. And some places there's a little more vegetation, and you can see like that's where there's maybe some more soil and water. But like all this kind of sunburnt looking scabby land out here, this is just like there's no soil. This is like freaking moon rocks. If you look at like the topography here, it's really harsh. And so we don't have a lot of worries about landslides is where I'm going with that, like in the lower elevations, because there's no soil to go, right? Like we'll have some erosion, but like below Forest Ranch, like down in here, like a lot of places there's not a lot of soil to worry about. But once you get up here, like into this zone above Forest Ranch, we're going to have really heavy precip this winter, just because it's how this landscape works. And that's going to fall on this hot burn. So there's kind of limited, there's some work that's going to be done here on some private lands of people like falling trees and putting wood into stream channels and other areas where there's going to be a lot of runoff, and that might help a little. But we did this kind of work after the campfire, and we were setting up erosion control to keep toxic water from pouring off of mobile home parks in Paradise into the creeks. And once it starts raining, it's pretty tough. Like the water goes where it wants. You can have some like straw bales and stuff out there. But if you like zoom out, if you're in here working on your little like meadow, and you're like, you know, so like right now, folks are looking at LiDAR imagery, and they're trying to figure out like where on the landscape do I have an opportunity to like maybe, is there a gully out here where I could like fall some trees and put in some plugs and like, you know, hay bales and stuff and try to keep the water from eroding. But then when you like zoom out on that to the scale of the problem, it's like pissing in the wind. Like there's not a lot we're going to do like in the next couple months before it rains to keep gravity and water from doing what they've done. You know, gravity and water created this landscape, and a lot of that happened during times like this. You know, every 100 years or something, you get a big fire, some erosion happens. So, I mean, living down here at the mouth, I think one thing that's worth pointing out here is that you can really see from space how this landscape works, which is that erosion has created, Chico's got this incredible orchard industry. We got like millions of dollars worth of almonds and walnuts and everything else. And so if you look at kind of out here in the valley, you can kind of see this transition from like rice to orchards. So like this area here, this is all kind of orchards. And then you get a little farther out and it's rice. And the deal with that is that all that good soil that makes the great orchards came down out of these creeks. Like this creek here, Chico Creek and Butte Creek, over time they eroded out of this gnarly mud flow. And Chico, Bidwell Park, we got this loamy soil that's like 100 feet deep here. That all kind of came puking out of these tributaries during floods of the last 100,000 years. So it's not a new thing for like big pulses of sediment to come down. The question is, like, for me, living right here, like, what's going to happen with all that? So not super happy to see all this red above me. And a lot of this stuff kind of resolves itself within the first winter or two. But we're all kind of sitting ducks a bit here in the valley. Now we'll move over here and look at Mud Creek. So Richardson Springs is another place. Some people live here up in Richardson Springs Road. And Mud Creek drains down from Cohasset into this area. And Mud Creek, like almost the whole watershed here, got burned hot. So same worries there about rapid runoff and flooding people's places out here. And same with Rock Creek. This is Rock Creek here. Rock Creek really got roasted, and if we look at where structures are, kind of in the floodplain. Down in here, there's a lot of people who live in these little floodplain areas, and especially out in here, off of like before you get to Kiefer Road. So there's going to be more people are going to be looking at this stuff in more detail. This is just kind of a first look at it. Someone's asking if the clear cuts help or hurt the firefighters. Kind of depends on the weather. We've talked about that before, and we'll talk about it again, but maybe not right now. Anyway, another kind of notable thing on the severity maps is just this green island of Cohasset that did not burn. As I said before, we did a bunch of prescribed fire work out in here, and there was a lot of thinning done. And I was saying, hey, I think that helped keep the fire out of Cohasset. I've got a friend who lives right here, who's a retired ops chief, super seasoned firefighter, and he's been up there walking around checking out the dozer lines, and he says I'd be careful claiming that fuels work changed any outcomes here. He said what saved Cohasset was super aggressive firefighting and Cal Fire dozer strike teams. He said that made a huge difference. The fire kind of ran up here on the first day. Find some more of that stuff. This is where the fire was at 1 o'clock on the second day of the fire. Right, it hadn't gotten to Cohasset. It was all burning out to the east or to the west, and then eventually this part of the fire was going to come up. So on the 26th, this part of the fire had pushed up into Cohasset, lower Cohasset, but still hadn't pushed up into this green island. And then by the 27th, the fire had gone all the way up into here. But that initial push kind of hung up on the top of Rock Creek Ridge, and the second push kind of wrapped around and went up Mud Creek. So anyway, I think that's worth mentioning. Is like there's a lot of desire for us to like claim that fuels treatment made the difference in saving this, and it's really hard to parse that out. And it no doubt helped save individual structures, but there's also an element of luck and an element of aggressive firefighting that really made a huge difference here. As you can see in Cohasset, you know, about half the homes in Cohasset that weren't up in that green island burned. And another thing that happened was there was a big fuel reduction project that got done out here by CAL FIRE that was ambitious and a lot of work. And the scale of the fire kind of just overwhelmed it. Like when you look at this push up through here, it was across such a broad front that even though that project was pretty large, it wasn't enough to really for them to make a stand. Okay, so Brad Sanders says, went up to Campbellville, saw one home left. Ishi's a black desert. I'm hoping to get up to Ishi, maybe even this weekend, to get a look at what's happening down in here off Ponderosa Way. You know, looking at the road to Ponderosa Way, it was kind of in the lee of this big run. When we look at like where the fire was on the 25th, I don't have to tease it apart, but fire kind of flanked through here. So interested to try to get up in there, and especially want to see what's happening up here in the Beaver Creek Pinery, which we've talked about a lot. There was a question about, got sidetracked here. So we're going to jump in and talk now about fire severity in Bidwell Park. A guy who flies this drone on YouTube, who goes by, what's his name? Can't remember. I've got it in here. This guy, he flew his drone over Bidwell and got some amazing footage. And so I just want to kind of narrate some of that. We'll play it, and if you like it, you can check out the link here on the Lookout. We've got kind of a little feature on the Lookout where we have his video and we have some screenshots with some narration. So if you want to check that out in more detail, go to the Lookout.
This is where the park fire started. It actually started down that way a little bit. We're kind of right off the highway. And the park extends up this way, and the fire just kept on going up that way towards Forest Ranch. And it went up that way to Cohasset. And where we live is over that way. And that's where the airport is and the CAL FIRE base, which was the start of the firefight, if you will. Okay. So we are going to be taking off in normal mode.
This guy is a frickin' stunt pilot. Hold on to your hats, folks.
All right, manual mode. Here we go.
Okay, manual mode, he says. So see that this part of the park didn't burn.
Look.
This is kind of
what has happened down here?
Iron Canyon here. And then down below here, Salmon Hole. And this area burned. It might have been good for it to burn, actually, if you look at all this dead and down from the last fire that happened about 6 years ago. Like, it's got plenty of fuel.
About 26 degrees of camera tilt.
This is Andy Bidwell Trail, and then here's Salmon Hole and Iron Canyon. And this is why we live in Chico. This place is freaking awesome.
You hear like a motorcycle on the highway over there. So, I have flown right here a lot. Up there is Sentinel Point. Looks like it burned.
Okay, so check out how many trees are green out in here. So this kind of burned. It wasn't like a head fire. The fire kind of flanked back down into here.
Break.
It ran after it got up on the ridge. It kind of backed down through here.
For a lot of this,
so this is kind of right above like
Devil's
Kitchen area.
View from up here first.
Our hole. You see these these white ash
10 minutes
areas
of
on the
flight
ground.
of
This
this.
burned in 1999, and there were still dead trees on the ground from this fire 25 years ago.
It takes 2 minutes to get across the canyon.
And so the
these
white
are good
ash,
things to think
those
about.
areas often burn hot, and oftentimes the radiant heat from those burning
So it
trees
started
will
over
kill
there,
the trees that are
raced up
near
this
it.
hill, raced all the way over there.
But so looking north towards Richardson Springs, you see a lot of dead trees, but a lot of the oaks out here, the live oak
And
will
it
sprout
just
back
kept
from the
going
base,
and going and going and going.
and the blue oak will sprout back from the
Thinking
crown
about this
themselves.
direction here. Yikes.
Just want to pause it here for a second. So this is North Rim Trail, and this is looking up Musty Buck Ridge, and this is Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, and this is kind of down like around Browns Hole. And as I said, the fire kind of blasted up through here and then it back down in here. So if we look at this Google imagery of like, so you can see that Severity here, like above Browns Hole. Like this is the canyon, the lava canyon that he was flying over. And this view is kind of looking up this way. So if we look at where the fire was, say on the 25th, you can see that it had kind of, this is the 25th at 1 in the afternoon. The fire started down in here and it kind of ran this way, but then it kind of, and they secured it on the edge of the canyon, but it kind of backed around on them and it burned downhill into the canyon. So a lot of what he flew over when we first were seeing that was the fire backing down in here. And it's kind of like what we do with a prescribed fire. And so one of the problems was that like not long later, the fire kind of, it was all the way across the canyon by the 26th, and then it was kind of more of a head fire burning up the canyon. But we got some backing fire in here in the initial couple days of the fire, and that's one of the reasons that the Severity looks the way it does.
This direction here. Yikes. And then it crossed
Still some gray pine alive
Big
here.
Chico Creek. Right here about Salmon Hole or Brown's Hole.
Yeah, so Salmon Hole's down in
I get
here.
confused at what the names of the
And
holes are
up
past
here is
Bear
kind
Hole.
of the
So there's Bear Hole and Diversion
Devil's
Dam
Kitchen.
right over this way. I guess the fire started at Alligator Hole, which is right over there where my crosshairs are. And I want to go take a look at that actually. So let's drop altitude.
Now it gets pretty sporty here. Hold on to your hats,
Let's
people.
lower my camera angle to 20. This is what it looks like to be in a fire.
Isn't this crazy? Yeah, so you see like some of these bigger oaks are fine. Some of the this area, like I said, burned in, some of this area burned in the park fire of 2021. And a lot of this hasn't burned since 1999. So I guess one thing to say about that is that there's opportunity that comes from something like this also, that like I like to go up here and hike around with my kids, and there's so many areas in Bidwell Park that are
I want to go take a
they're
look
just
at
too
that,
thick with
actually.
brush to
So
get through it all. And so you have a fire like this, you get this
altitude.
opportunity to explore, and then you get to see it come
Lower
back,
my
and the brush sprouts
camera angle
back.
to
And
20.
so it's just part of Bidwell Park
This
is
is what it looks
this
like
happening.
to be in a fire burn scar.
And we've wanted to do more prescribed burning in the park, and it's difficult to get it done. And so in a lot of ways, the park just got a prescribed burn. And a lot of the
Range
effects are
down
going to be
here?
exactly what you would try to do if, it'd be hard to do a prescribed burn this hot
I'm
and
really
reduce
glad
that
that this
fuel
side of the canyon didn't burn.
without making a bunch of people think that you were a total fruitcake and destroyer of nature.
Next stop is
So,
going to be Alligator Hole, which is right over here,
Park
which is
got
where
its
the
burn.
fire started.
A lot of this stuff in a year or two, a lot of people won't even be able to tell that it actually burned.
Okay. Land. I made it mad. Good enough. All right, so I'm jumping right into the
Bear Hole.
second clip.
And we're cruising downstream
This is Bear
towards
Hole,
the
and
origin of the
any
fire.
other day, this place would be just
We had
crazy
a
populated with people. Just
we had a prescribed fire
water,
training class
bathing
here in the park
and
for
playing and
future burn bosses.
hanging out
It
and
was kind of
but
the final
the whole
class
park is
for
closed.
state burn bosses, and we wrote burn
So,
plans for all of this land along the creek here.
Unfortunately, nobody
That
can
didn't
enjoy
burn.
any of this. We're just going to keep on going downstream. Right about here is where it is, and it's under those power lines up ahead is technically where it started. So I'm actually going to get up over the power lines here, and I want to just kind of hover. I want to make sure I'm totally clear of them. There's a second smaller set of lines that I have to watch out for
Yes,
here.
the fire started right out in here.
I want to make sure I'm like totally
This
over
area
them,
is
and
all
I just kind
solid
of fight in
thistle, so
position
it had a
hold
lot
here.
of pretty heavy fuels in here.
Right down there is where I believe it started, and I'm gonna come around and get it from a different angle because I run out of travel with my gimbal here. I'm looking for a car or something here right now, and I don't see anything. There's the car, a bunch of car tracks.
I think it started right here. I think you see those tracks
in the burnt area up just above the road, but the report is that the guy pushed it off the road down, which would lead me to believe it went down towards
You can see the burn we did down canyon
creek
there for a minute. Yeah, so the fire started here. It ran up the hill. One of the problems on the landscape in general is that where you have power lines, high voltage power lines like these, you can't drop directly on the lines with retardant. And so there's these kind of funky zones on the landscape where if a fire starts, you know, our primary tool for containing a fast-moving grass fire is air tankers, especially if you can't drive around it. And this quickly gets too steep to drive a fire engine on. So the air tankers couldn't paint the right flank of this fire right away because it was right under, you know, it started right here and it was under the power lines. And so it got up some steam here. You can see the retardant line over here, and they painted it with retardant and helicopter drops right off the bat. I've got some footage I shot that first day of the helicopter drops right in here. But it was quickly up the hill, and once it's up the hill, it was kind of like it's like we're looking right here. And this first perimeter, once it got up the hill, it was just in this really bad terrain. It doesn't look really that steep, but you can't really, like, if you're going to drive a fire engine from like the access right here up to here, it's going to take you like 45 minutes probably. It's seriously like 1 mile an hour, just lava rock. So it didn't take long for the fire to just start kind of churning through here and then spotting. And air tankers, not only was it running right under the power lines, but air tankers, when they drop and they have these kind of steep bluffs, the retardant kind of eddies in the lee side of the ridge, and you don't get complete coverage. So by the time it was like established up in here, it was just kind of a goner. There wasn't really anything they're going to do because it's the same story all the way up through here. It's just really hard to make vehicle access across this transect, and that's the story all the way to Red Bluff. You know, I've got some images I shot from a helicopter. I'll bring those up in a minute. So I don't know what else this guy's got.
So you can see the burn went right directly
Anyway,
up.
this area all burned.
This is the initial
3
burn.
years
It went
ago.
straight up to the,
And a lot
to
of
the
these
left
trees
to
here,
that ridge,
trees
which
that
is Musty
survived
Buck
that last
Ridge.
burn and will likely survive this
And
one
then
too.
they tried to stop it, and they actually sort of did, but then it jumped. Once it hit the ridge, it jumped over, and it just kept going up that towards Forest Ranch. So whatever vehicle was here, they've gotten rid of it already.
Drones up, we rise on.
All right. I'm going to pull up some imagery I got here that's had for a long time and haven't had much use for. This stuff's kind of fun because I've been collecting imagery and just stuff like this like for my whole career, and so to have a chance, have an audience that's interested in seeing it is really fun. So check these out. Take me a minute. Here we go. Taxing the old hard drive here. While you're at it, you can check out the lookout. It's like, do you really want to open 300 photos? It's like, yeah, I do. They're small. All right. Okay, so I got to fly from, this is 2003. I got to fly from Chico to Highway 44 along the power lines. It was for PG&E, and we were looking at, they were wanting us to help develop like vegetation management strategy for under the power lines. So this just gives you an idea. This is basically the route that the fire took on its way from Chico to Red Bluff, or Chico to Highway 36. And you just see like it's canyon after canyon like this. I think this is Sycamore Creek or maybe Rock Creek. And just, you see there's no roads, there's no way, so and the fire's just running left to right through here. So you can see why it would be really difficult to control. So we just flew like right over the power lines. They flew kind of sideways and we had the door open, and I was sitting in the back seat taking photos. And it was spectacular. It was like one of the wildest experiences of my life. The guy was flying kind of sideways, like 75 miles an hour right over the power lines. But this is what it's like. This is, I think this is, this might be Deer Creek here. Yeah, Deer Creek. And so there was just no chance that we were going to pick it up. This is some Ishii wilderness, like lower Ishii wilderness. This might be Mill Creek, Die Creek. This is coming up to, this is Antelope Creek, kind of the main stem Antelope Creek. And then you come up out of Antelope Creek into the Hogsback. So the fire got here kind of on the second day, and then they kind of fought it as it, this is like, when you get to the top of the Hogsback, it's the first road really. Like if we're following the fire, took off from Chico Airport, flew this corridor up over Deer Creek and over Mill Creek and Antelope Creek, and then you get up on top here and there's the Hogsback, which is a terrible road. And a friend of mine was in a dozer on this fire, and he started down here at Dale Station, and he pushed a line all the way up Hogsback, all the way back up to Little Giant Mill Road. And he said it was like the single roughest, it took him like 16 hours or something, and it said it's the single roughest day of his life. And he started this fire with 30 hours on a brand new dozer, and I talked to him like a week ago, and he said he had 450 hours on the dozer that were all on the park fire. So anyway, they didn't stop the fire there. And when you look at the imagery, you can kind of see why. If it shows up here. Lost my pictures. There we go. Where'd they go? I guess that's it. I guess the pictures are gone. Here we go. There we go. Yeah, so it's coming up to Hogsback. And I guess Highway 36 is somewhere around here. Yeah, so it's Inskip Hill here. So the fire ended up crossing Highway 36, going up and over Inskip Hill. And it's just terrible ground to fight fire in. You know, like, and this is a testament to like how crazy this area grows vegetation, is that this area had been like whacked and sprayed with herbicide repeated times, and then it just all comes back. They use some really strong stuff here, and vegetation just likes to grow in this zone. Anyway, as you continue up, it's just more of that, and this landscape kind of extends all the way up to Redding. So it was nice that the weather stopped, because it wouldn't have gotten a lot easier to fight fire north of 36. It just happened to be that the wind really gave us a present there. Anyway. How's Dye Creek looking? I don't know. I don't know how any of this is looking, but like when we look at our severity maps, it all burned really well. But I think, if you look at the video we looked at of Chico,
The blue skies high.
sorry, that you could expect a lot of the same kind of effects all the way across this front country, and that you're going to have places where the fire kind of spotted around. You're going to have places that are burned hot, but even in places where it burned hot, a lot of the trees are going to survive. And like I said, a couple years from now, a lot of this you won't be able to tell what happened at all. And that one of the biggest worries out in this country is invasive grasses, like that cheatgrass and other kind of non-native species are a problem out, and we're seeing that in other places. So there's some worry, I think, among some range folks that you might see invasions of cheatgrass. Now, one thing that is kind of lucky for us in that the fire moved through this area so fast is that when we look at like where our dozer lines are in this country, like these aren't dozer lines, but there's no dozer lines through this whole kind of front country because the fire is moving too fast for there to be a strategy or to even get up there. And so folks have said like, oh, we could have stopped the fire if they allowed dozers in the wilderness. It's like, well, there weren't dozers in play really anywhere once you got out into here. So that's good in a lot of ways because dozers carry weeds. They bring in weeds, they spread weeds. And so we're less likely to have weed invasions post-fire in places that there were no dozers working. Oh, man. So I don't know yet. Someone says it's sad that it burned in the wilderness area, and I just want to bring up an image that I've shared several times that I think really tells a story here, which is this is a map of fire history, California fire history since 1900. And if we look kind of by decade, working our way back, like this landscape has had, like these are fires up until the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Some of these areas out here have burned 7 times, maybe 8 times by now in the last 100 years. And the vegetation is still there. So I think that before we fret too much, it's really important to just to keep that in mind that, where's my fire? When we look at the area of this fire, I did some measurements and shared them, that like almost 80% of this fire burned in these fire adapted brush and grass types that will recover really quickly, or in the recovery will have great benefits for the deer and everything else. And we talked about the deer and the fact that the Tehama deer herd, it's migratory and it spends the winter up in Lassen, or the summer up in Lassen and the high country. And so a lot of the deer weren't down in here because it was 105 degrees. It's super hot. And so the deer that were in here were like, there weren't that many. And so it's not like every deer in the Tehama herd got killed by this fire, because most of them were up in the high country because it's the hottest days of the year. So when they come down in the winter, after some rains, all this brush is going to be creating new shoots, and there's going to be a huge amount of food for them. So there's kind of this, in the interim, there's critters, kangaroo rats and other small fauna out here that have their holes that they hide out in and like that may survive the fire, that are going to have a hard time finding food. But I've seen photos already of reef sprouts, and those reef sprouts are super tender and palatable to wildlife. So I think it's important not to. It's important to think about the subtlety of all this. You know, that when we talk about, someone asked like, "Hey, how do you figure that is the number that's 80%?" And I said, well, I figure using data, and I just want to show like kind of what that looks like. And what that looks like basically is like you go up around Cohasset, go around Lower Cohasset, and there's mainly oaks and brush. And this is generous, right? Like I could have drawn my 80% thing. I could have drawn that all the way up into here and tighter. I drew it kind of loose. So, but this is my data, right? This is brushland. Oh, sorry. Oh, I crashed Google Earth. Show's over. All right. Someone wants a fire history map of the Mendocino. I think it's gonna have to be another show. I'm gonna jump off. It's been an hour, and I'm trying to hold it to that. But anyway, I just want to point you to the lookout. A lot of the stuff we're talking about gets covered here in a kind of more lasting fashion. We're not posting a lot of stuff directly to Facebook just because I don't want to give them my stuff for free, and I don't like Facebook. So we'll post updates on Facebook that point you to our live streams, and a lot of you already know about that, but I want to show you we do have a lookout page on Facebook, and it's a good spot to we post there all our stuff. So like the lookout page, and that'll direct you for the most part to the lookout website, and you can also jump in there and you can shop for these cool hats. We got a new shipment of hats yesterday, and Erica shipped out 75 hats today. So if you go on our website and click on the hats tab here, it'll take you to our merch site where you can get stickers, you can get hats, and we're almost out of stickers. We're buying some more. So that's a good way to support us. And if you want to donate directly to us, we've got a donate tab on here. And you can become a subscriber. You can donate one time. You can use Venmo. And a new thing on here is the wish list. If you want to help us up our game, looking for a pro quality video camera. And I can't just buy one right now. But if you've got one that you're not using, or you know someone who is a documentarian who has some new gear and they want to get us something that's still good but not the best in the world, we'd love to get that flowing, because we got a lot to work on, and we're gonna have more stuff. We're gonna have more stuff coming your way, so you can support us through the website. Got Jasper here helping me out, and thank you guys. Appreciate all your support. Like I said, not promising that we're going to do these every night, but as long as we have the energy, we'll do them at least 3 nights a week. Thanks, everyone.